Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 7th of September of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. You know that usually I start the video from Orechov, from the Bradley Square, then we move to the Vremevka tactical bridgehead, and usually we finish the video with the Kupiansk and Liman front lines. But today I would like to start with another region. Today we're going to start with Chernihiv and Kupiansk in Sumy area. Today the Russian military expert Rybar published the video of the results of work of Russian DRG, so Diversion and Reconnaissance Group that operates in the vicinity of Chernihiv and Sumy. Probably there are a lot of forces, a lot of soldiers, and today there was a video. He published like a series of videos from different periods of time, basically from this summer, a lot of videos. So basically the Russians operates in Chernihiv and Sumy area, and as you know, usually if the DRG or reconnaissance teams is the first step before the beginning of any offensive operation. The main purpose of DRG squads is to prepare the territory, to clear the area, to capture soldiers, to reduce as much as possible enemy's forces, to establish control over supply and support roads, to get information and so on. And as we can see, according to this video and many other different information we got from these territories, the Russian operates and the Russians are pretty successful in this direction. I can't tell you whether the Russians have completed the preparation of their offensive operation in this direction or not, but anyway, as I see, the Russians do everything they need and they can to complete the preparation and to launch significant offensive operation in this direction. And I'll remind you that, for example, since the beginning of August, we got a lot of updates from this territory, from this bridgehead, about DRG operations, about DRG activity. For example, one more time, we're gonna watch this video that we got somewhere in the beginning of August. On this video, as you can see, the Russian DRG entered the village, and as a result of a small operation, they managed to destroy the entire Ukrainian position along the border. So furthermore, don't forget the words of the president of Russian Federation. He told us, if you remember, that if the Ukrainians were not going to stop provocations along the border, the Russians will be forced to create a barrier and to create a buffer zone, and this buffer zone will be created on the territory of Ukraine. So we'll see what is going to be next, but the only thing that we can say that the Russians are pretty successful and pretty effective in Chernihiv and Sumy area. Now we're moved to the ground and we're going to start discussion with the Kupiansk and Liman front lines. So when talking about Kupiansk today, during the day we got at least two updates that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to force the Ukrainians to step back from Sinkovka, at least from the northern part, and the Russians reported that they managed to capture the northern part of the Sinkovka because of rotation process. So just newly created or newly mobilized forces were moved in direction of Sinkovka, and while they were trying to establish control or take their place, the Russians launched like an unexpected attack, and as a result of that attack, the Ukrainian forces were forced to step back and to leave Sinkovka, and currently the Ukrainians control just the forest on the south of this area. Of course, it's a very important and very necessary operation, but it doesn't matter whether you were able to force the enemy to step back or not. The most important is whether you are able to hold at least a night, because we understand that probably right now the Ukrainians have already launched their counter-offensive operation with the purpose to return control, and if the Russians are able to hold the territory, then they will be able to dig in deeper, and this is going to be a real victory. The Russians reported that as a result of clashes on the Kupiansk front line, the Ukrainians lost 55 soldiers. Now we are moving to Kuzyomovka, to Raigorodka, Svatova direction. As you can see, there are a lot of icons on above this territory. The Ukrainians continue publishing the videos of clashes with the Russians on these directions. If you remember, during the previous days, probably yesterday, the day before yesterday, the Russians launched another offensive operation in this direction, but this was a very interesting operation because in comparison with the previous attempts, the Russians were using the armored fist, a lot of tanks, a lot of armored vehicles. The Russians were attacking the Ukrainians using the broad frontline tactics, but something, as I understand, went wrong, or we need to wait some time when the Russians will publish more details about that operation. But according to geolocations we got from the Ukrainians, a lot of armored vehicles of the Russian forces were destroyed using the drone strikes, artillery strikes, and so on. We haven't seen like the usage of HIMARS, but the drones, Ukrainian drones, worked well. For example, on this video we can see the beginning of that operation. As you can see, at least 2-3 tanks were involved. The Ukrainians started bombing the Russians right at the beginning, to be more precise, the 68th Jaeger Brigade of Ukrainian forces. So anyway, we can use these videos for two purposes. The first one, to confirm the Russian control on the east of Novoyegorovka. The attack took place in this direction. Not sure that whether the Russians were able to get some success, but I believe that in a day or two we're going to receive some updates from the Russian side as well. When talking about Liman front line, the total losses of the Ukrainians were around 60 soldiers per day. Now we are moving to Klishchevka area, and today we also got a lot of very interesting details and updates from this territory. Probably the most important and interesting video came today from Mironovsky, the settlement that located on very far on the east from Klishchevka. And I would like to start this area from this video because this is an example of effective and usage of HIMARS missile. If you remember, during the previous days we pointed a lot regarding the an effective usage of HIMARS missiles. And on this video we can see the example of the correct and effective usage. We see a lot of Russian trucks, probably with munitions, that were trying to unpack and load their ammo in some operational ammo depot, and as a result, as I understand, of 2 HIMARS strikes, at least 4 or 5 Russian trucks were destroyed and the local ammo depot. So this is the successful usage when talking about the Ukrainians, of course, of HIMARS missiles, but not to attack with HIMARS one single D-30 or D-20 howitzer. Very interesting video we got today from Klishchevka, which confirms that the Russians still controls the settlement. On this video we can see the Russian infantry who was operating in the village, and the one Russian soldier was wounded, and the evacuation squad took a decision to evacuate him. And basically this video confirms that probably the Russian control a little bit more in comparison with the map that you can see on the screen. Furthermore, the Ukrainians during the day tried to return control over the positions that located on the hill 205.7. If you remember, a few days ago we discussed the video how the Ukrainians, how the Russians managed to capture a group of Ukrainians, and they were using this forest line to evacuate the prisoners of war. Today the Ukrainians launched an attack to restore control over this forest line. They used for that purposes at least 1 platoon. And Bradley, the Ukrainians managed to land, and after that the Russians started bombing and shelling. Probably that attack was repelled by the Russians, and after that the Russians also destroyed every single light car and vehicle that Ukrainians left among the fields. And the main purpose of those attacks were, of course, to reduce the Ukrainian possibilities for evacuation. When talking about this territory by Bakhmut and Donetsk front line, the Ukrainians during the previous 24 hours lost around 320 soldiers, so as you can see the level of losses is very heavy. Furthermore, the Russians continue bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions in the vicinity of Zaliznianska. If you remember, during the previous days the Ukrainians were trying to storm the settlement, storm the forest. They were pretty successful during the first 2 days, but after that the Russians launched a counterattack, and as a result of counterattack the Ukrainians had significant losses and were forced to step back in direction of Minkovka, Golubovka, Orekhovo-Vasilievka. Now we understand that attack, that Ukrainian attack of 30th Mechanized Brigade in direction of that forest, was just like a media propaganda before the Independence Day of Ukraine. Now we are moving to Donetsk direction, and we got also a lot of updates. We see some kind of intensifying of actions from both sides, either from the Russians and the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians tried to attack the Russian positions, FPV drones around Avdiivka. Probably they started preparation before the next counter-offensive operation with the purpose to develop and to maintain their foothold around Avdiivka, because currently we can say that Avdiivka is an operational encirclement. Supply roads, every single supply road in this area is under complete Russian fire control, so they need to a little bit to push the Russians in Vysyola, Opytne, Pievsky. So for these purposes they were attacking the Russians, they were attacking their operational ammo depots, warehouses, and so on. Very interesting updates are coming from Novomikhailivka and Konstantinovka. When talking about Novomikhailivka, the Russians destroy another position of Ukrainian forces in this area using the Ilmur missile, the missile that the Russians use from helicopters Mi-8 and Mi-24 from hidden positions. But the most important video is coming from Konstantinovka. On this video we see that the entire settlement was set on fire, and the Russians launched significant artillery attack against the settlement. If we increase the number of updates since the beginning of August, we will see that the Russians were pretty focused in this area. They were attacking this territory from Konstantinovka to Novomikhailivka and even to the south to Ogledar with all types of weapons they have, with drones, with missiles, with bombs, with artillery systems, with stealth flamethrower systems, with guided bombs. A lot of videos, and if we take a look at this configuration, probably this is something like a beginning artillery preparation before the Russian offensive operation, with the purpose to penetrate the Ukrainian defense belt and to attack and to strike the Ukrainian forces in their flanks in the Vremivka tactical bridgehead. When talking about Vremivka tactical bridgehead, we almost haven't received nothing from this territory, just few geolocated videos how the Ukrainians were trying to attack the Russian positions, evacuation teams, engineering squads, and so on. Probably the most interesting video is that how the Ukrainians using FPV drones were trying to shut down the Russian helicopter Ka-52. They haven't managed to do this, but anyway, this is a very interesting video, and probably this is not the last case when we see an attempt with the FPV drone to shut down a helicopter. I believe that this is a very great idea, and something tells me that by the end of this special military operation we are going to see a lot of such cases. The Russians reported that as a result of clashes on the South Donetsk area, the Ukrainians lost 180 soldiers. As you can see, the level of losses has been increased in comparison with the previous days, and almost the same level, yes, and mainly this number is connected with the Ukrainian attempt to attack in direction of Novodonetska from Zolotaya Niva and from Prichistovka in direction of Novomayorskaya. Now we are moving to Zaporozhye area, and today probably this is another day, probably the most hot area, the hottest area in this on the Ukrainian all over the combat line. Today there were very heavy clashes and fierce battles in the vicinity of Rabotina and in the vicinity of Verbovo. We see like two areas of the icons. The Ukrainians didn't attack further in direction of Novoprokopovka. The Russians managed to restore control over some footholds, or probably to turn them in the gray zone. The Ukrainians were forced to step back to the northern direction. Today the Russians also but with using the FPV drones destroyed the Ukrainian Bradley that was located on the south of Rabotina. This is a very important video. And this video is important because, as you can see, this Bradley machine was located very close to the Russian positions, but for some reasons the Russians took a decision not to evacuate. And that means that the Russians don't have possibilities to send evacuation squads, platoons, teams to the north, because everything is under complete Ukrainian fire, artillery, and drone control. And for them it was much more easier to destroy this machine with FPV drone and not to allow the Ukrainians to evacuate this Bradley. From the other side, the Ukrainians have the same situation. On this video we see how the Ukrainians dropped the bomb inside of the tank, and after that the tank was destroyed, and that means that the Russians also don't have possibilities to evacuate this tank because of the fact that this machine is located very close to the combat line. But also the Ukrainians don't have to steal and evacuate the Russian tank, so they also took a decision just to destroy it. The Russians during the day were bombing Robotyne heavily with all types of weapons they have, just with on purpose to slow down the Ukrainians and not to allow them to complete regrouping. From the other side, the Ukrainians were bombing the Russian positions on the western flank of Robotyne, closer to the Kopony, and this is very important video because we see that this is probably the first video since the beginning of the situation in Robotyne when the Ukrainians took a decision to change their focus and took a decision to maintain their flanks in the vicinity of Robotyne. Maybe they're planning to attack in direction of Kopony, who knows? But anyway, this is very important to understand what is the plan. The author of this video said that on this video we can see how the Ukrainians discovered the Russian mortar system and destroyed it. Also, one more time, the Russians continue attacking the Ukrainians along the main supply road that goes to Robotyne. I don't know why, but the Ukrainians, no matter the losses, no matter the problems, still use this road to redeploy their forces from the north to the south and in direction of Vremivka, Verbova. The Russians during the day destroyed one Bradley, the same squad, Bobry squad, somewhere among the forest lines, and also the Russians destroyed another Ukrainian light vehicle that probably or very likely was making something like evacuation of wounded personnel, or probably moved from the combat line with like soldiers, or brought some munition or something like this. Anyway, the main supply roads of Ukrainian forces under complete fire control. And of course, the situation leads to like negative and leads to decrease of the Ukrainian chances to complete the storming of Verbova successfully. For example, today the Ukrainians made a lot of attempts to storm the settlement. Mainly they were moving along the main street, and that today there was another reconnaissance in force. That attack was repelled, but currently the Ukrainians have another problem, and probably the main problem of the Ukrainians is not like the stronghold of Verbova itself. The main problem of the Ukrainians is the presence of Russian airfields, air forces, and as you can see on this video, the Russians used at least 4 guided bombs, 500s, to slow down and to stop the Ukrainian offensive operation. I can't even imagine yourself what the Ukrainians on the field, the soldiers, thought about when they saw those explosions. I believe that they didn't have any wish to continue offensive operation, but no matter that, the Ukrainians continue also attack the Russian forces on the flanks, trying to develop the gap, trying to develop their foothold. And anyway, as I understand, the Ukrainians will continue attacking the settlement because, as we discussed, Anthony Blinken told Zelensky that the deadline for Tokmak is November. So according to Blinken, the Ukrainians must take Tokmak before the November, or at least to start the assault operation. If they are not able to do this, probably very likely the next year, the United States of America will reduce the financing of Ukrainians. So, as we can see, and according to the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation, as a result of clashes in this area, the Ukrainians lost 110 soldiers and lost around 11 armored vehicles. A lot of losses, significant losses. The Ukrainians continue losing armored vehicles, manpower every single day. As you know, starting this autumn, the Ukrainians will start mobilization of women into their army, sick people, and so on. So very difficult to understand what kind of forces the Russians will face the next year, or if this conflict is going to continue till the 2025, or whom the Russians are going to fight with in the 2025. Very difficult to understand. The Russians continue bombing and attacking the concentration of Ukrainian forces along the Dnieper River. Today they made another attack against the Ukrainian concentration forces in the settlement by the name of Adradakamyanka. And this is not the first attack in a row. During the previous week and this week, the Russians made a lot of attacks in this area. As you can see, probably the Ukrainians have concentrated their forces on this bank with attempt to restart or launch another storming and landing operation on the Russian bank of Dnieper River. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.